we cannot stop until we are satisfied that our fundamental rights and freedoms have been restored and they will be respected, and this will never happen again.
Tamara Ugolini here with Rebel News. I'm at Queen's Park, downtown Toronto, for the Worldwide Freedom Rally. Now we see that restrictions and mandates are easing on the provincial level. However, they remain heavy-handed and in full force on the federal level. So I'm here to get some feedback from the people in attendance and maybe speak to some of the speakers that are on the lineup to get their opinion on what brings them out here today, what the future looks like for the freedom rallies, and to see if they think that it's a fair assessment that we should not be concerned with mask mandates and vaccine passports here in Canada as Canadians, as there is conflict abroad. So stay tuned and we'll check it out. What freedoms bring you out to the rally today?
Once our freedoms are taken, they're taken, and there's not much we can do after that. So I think just doing little acts like this, like coming out to show that we're not forgetting what's happening, we're here still fighting, and we see what's happening, and we want the government to know that we see what's happening, and we're not going to take it lightly, because Canada is supposed to be one of the greatest countries in the world, and it's not anymore.
This movement is open to anybody. There's a right, we got the people from the middle, we got people from the left, and I am about labor and human rights. So when I heard that people are losing their jobs because they have their own opinion, that's wrong.
So I'm here with retired OPP forensic investigator Vince Gerses, and now retired or on leave, resigned, yes, RCMP Danny Bulford. A lot of people say, the restrictions are easing and the mandates are going away, so what's the point in coming out and continuing to protest? What would you say to someone who says something like that?
The provincial mandates haven't completely gone away, even though they're heading in the right direction. And then, of course, we're still looking at all of the federal mandates, right, affecting the truckers, federal employees, and our travel restrictions.
At the provincial level, there's easing, but I don't see any easing for the unvaccinated at the federal level. So I still feel that I'm not free. I'm not free to come and go and do as I please as a Canadian. It's shocking. I thought this was a democratic country.
I look forward to going to the businesses that have supported us this whole time. Those businesses that never really did those mandates and stood up for our rights and freedoms, those will be the first ones I go to when this is done.
We're seeing the mask mandates drop the QR codes, but we know that this is not the end, right? Because we're going to move into the whole digital world. Freedom of speech is pretty much no longer, but they're going to try and make that official. I think what I'm trying to move towards is just a better future for our children, to be able to, eat like organic and healthy and not think that's like strange, to be homeschooled and not worry about that being taken away, to be able to play, to breathe, to smile, and just kind of trying to end this like segregation and hate that it seems to have come over our country.
What would you say to those people who allude to the fact that, the masking and the vaccine passports kind of irrelevant because there's conflict and war, in Ukraine and Russia elsewhere?
Right, okay, so yes, I hear this a lot. And one tragedy doesn't eliminate another tragedy. That's how I feel about it. You can't compare the two. Like, obviously, what's happening in Ukraine is horrendous. People are dying, but people here are also losing their freedom. So you can't compare the two. We have to fight for what we can fight for, and that's what we're doing.
I don't think it's ever selfish to fight for your freedoms. People are still getting terminated from their jobs of employment. I just got a message from someone today who just got fired for his choice of bodily autonomy.
We still need to be here because we need to be free. Canada is democratic, and we need to be able to make our choices that's best for us.
This fight is on an international scale, and here within Canada, the freedoms that I'm concerned about, that I think all Canadians should be concerned about, is the issue of how the World Economic Forum is tied in very tightly and integrally with our government, how our media is wrapped up into this, how our banking system is tied to this, how the ideology of moving towards a social credit score system, which is exactly what our government is doing, ties directly to our freedoms and our freedom of movement, our freedom of association, all the freedoms that are right now guaranteed to us by the Charter of Rights and the Bill of Rights. And we saw that in Ottawa, how we had the freedom to peacefully protest until our government said, you no longer do. and now we're going to move in with force and break that peaceful protest up. So we're losing our freedoms on a regular basis. This is very concerning, and it should be concerning to all Canadians.
If we continue to allow these people in that building at Queen's Park to keep behaving like kings and queens and ruling over us as opposed to being public servants, we're just going to get more of the same. So I'm hoping that in this province, Canadians, Ontario citizens see the light, see the lies for what they are, and take responsibility for that and vote for change.
I don't want to feel like I'm living in a communist country. I don't want my rights to be taken away ever so slowly, little by little, so we don't know what's actually happening, and I feel like that's the direction Canada's going in.
Do you have any connections within existing military personnel? What's the feedback there if you have any colleagues that you've been able to speak to about the ongoing kind of civil liberties crisis we're facing as Canadians?
Yeah, it's a great question. The new defense minister just came out recently and made a big public statement that we need to recruit more Canadians to join the military. Meanwhile, they're about to 5F or kick out basically almost 1,000 veterans. They're literally denying soldiers, Canadian citizens, the right to serve their countries because they're upholding their own bodily autonomy on something that they know to be immoral and unethical and illegal if you just look up the laws around informed consent. So I as a Canadian Forces veteran, I'm disgusted. And I know a lot of veterans out there, and I know a lot of current serving ones that are being kicked out are disgusted. And I still can't believe that we would do these kinds of things to people that have served their country.
Since you started speaking out against those mandates and obviously took a very principled stand yourself, what's the feedback been like from your colleagues or anyone who you still might have connections with in the force or within government?
The response has been very supportive, even with members that are still actively serving. But it's been a mixed approach. Some people were very upset with me for speaking out and for drawing attention to my old unit in particular. I couldn't stay silent.
We can talk all this talk, but who's going to walk the walk?
Well, freedom is never free. And people need to understand freedom comes with a price. And certainly many of our veterans have paid the price for freedoms. And what we are seeing now is a different type of a loss of freedom. It's not happening through a combat or battle or a war where we have an opposing force coming in. We actually have our government working against the interests of Canadians and supporting corporate interests and international interests. And that has actually been called out by our national intelligence agencies. That is very concerning, and this is going to be a long fight.
So the protesters have moved up on Bloor Street, are now heading south on Yonge Street. You can see some of them behind me to Nathan Phillips Square. Overall, I'd say there was about several hundred, maybe 1,000 or so people in attendance. Pretty decent turnout for a dreary, rainy, early spring day in Toronto. The sentiments from the protesters themselves and the speakers are that the freedom rallies aren't going anywhere until we get a full restoration of our freedom of choice to choose what is injected or not into our bodies, and to choose whether or not we'd like to wear a facial decoration. So stay tuned for our reports as we continue to cover the protests and the rallies across our great nation of Canada. Here in Toronto, for Rebel News, I'm Tamara Ugolini. You can follow all of our coverage at convoyreports.com. There we have featured all of the cross-Canada reporting we have done, and even some in the United States, on the convoy reports and the subsequent rallies that happened thereafter. That website again is convoyreports.com.